I'm Jimmy Lewis with Dirt Bike Test.
And I'm Paul Guillien with Touratech-USA. We're here at the Touratech Rally, and we just got our hands on a brand new KTM 1090 Adventure R. We've outfitted it with all the Touratech parts, and we're going to go out and take it for a first ride, see what our thoughts are about this new motorcycle.
Okay, Paul, so we got to spend some time on the 1090, the Touratech one. So I got to ride a 1090 Adventure R back in New York a few weeks ago for a long time, and I got to play around in your bike, and you just got to take it out for a ride. So what do we think?
Well, I'm liking it an awful lot. It's, my favorite type of bikes are those with 21-inch front wheels for adventure riding. I'm one of the co-founders of the Backcountry Discovery Route, so when I'm evaluating a bike, I'm always thinking, is it good for a BDR? Is it good for Forest Service roads and that sort of thing? Is it good for getting to those roads? And I was really pleased with it.
Yeah. And for me, I have a long background on adventure bikes and riding all different kinds, especially KTMs from the very early 950s to I currently own an 1190 standard and an R. And right away when I got on this bike, I'm like, it's an improvement. I mean, there's really not that much change from 1190. It's kind of small stuff, but it's bigger than you would think, and actually smaller than you think. So I'm pretty impressed in a very performance-oriented aspect. I think it's not only as good as the older bikes, it's better.
Okay. Yeah, I like it better than the 1190. I like the 1190, but I think they made it better by shaving some weight out of it. It doesn't have all the power that the 1190 has, but I never used that power anyway. So I think it's really a good balance for off-road riding. It's got plenty of power. I like the traction control mode on it. I think that allowed me to play and have fun. I was able to get the bike a little bit sideways, but not too much for my skill set. So I really enjoyed that. I think that's a great option for a lot of guys. And on the ABS side of things, I rode it without the ABS on. I had ABS off, but then when I switched it on, it's on the off-road mode, it's full manual on the rear, so you can skid steer and really have good feel for it, but it's got the ABS on the front brake, which I thought was pretty good. It actually would bite enough that I could feel the front end moving, and then it would release.
Yeah, so that's essentially off-road ABS, and what that does is it allows you to lock the rear wheel if you want to, but you still have anti-locking in the front. And because off-road, the way we like to think about it is the rear brake is more for control than slowing you down. So sometimes locking up your rear wheel is a good thing. We want to do it to control the bike. And so being able to lock the rear wheel up, but then still, have somebody saving your ass when something goes wrong with the front brake, i.e. skidding, it kicks in and stops that. So it's a pretty cool thing with this, the 1090 is it doesn't have the lean angle stuff that the 1290 and then the older 1190 had. But in reality, that's a pretty kind of extreme thing. It really does work, but for this kind of bike, you really don't notice it.
Yeah, so one of the ways they shaved the weight out of it was it doesn't have a center stand. So one of the drawbacks there is if you have a flat tire, it's a little harder to get that rear wheel off the bike. They also took some weight out of the motor.
Front wheel.
Or the front wheel. Yeah, so they took some weight out of the motor, the rotating mass. I think that contributes to that lighter feel. Still got plenty of power. What do you think about the motor?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's for me, I noticed the reduction in power right off the bottom, like right when you start cracking the throttle. And I played with all the modes, and most of the time when I'm riding the bike, I'm putting it in sport mode because I want it to, as much as I like smooth power, I want it to be very responsive. And if there's anything, I felt it lost just this probably to the, maybe 3 to 5% throttle where it doesn't have the pickup or the response that I'm used to on my 10 or my 1190. And I wish I could get that back, and for sure when I get one of these, I'm going to play with it to get that. But other than that, and we're talking about 99% of the time you're riding, I love it. I don't notice there's reduced power. Because it spins so easy, it picks up so easy, especially with the traction control off. And for somebody that rides around with the traction control off most of the time, I like leaving it on when I'm just adventure riding because it's fun. It's not like because it's working the butterfly valves, not doing the ignition cut. So even though you turn the throttle, it says, okay, I'm going to give you, the throttle without going, It just smoothly does it. So it lets you be playful with it. You can get the back end to slide. And when it's just about the time it's too much, it cuts a little bit of power. It doesn't open the throttle so much. And it's almost kind of strangely magical.
It is magical in that when you're doing it, unless you really think about what it's doing, you almost don't notice it. You just think that you have good throttle control, and that's really nice.
Where you do notice it though is in sand or mud.
Yeah, for sure.
So what it does there, and like I said, it's really good. But then, there's times when you just want the bike to spin. I mean, that's just the way that we're used to going through stuff. And even though it does a good job of cutting the power and trying to get traction, you're just weird because you're turning the throttle and it's just not accelerating. And sometimes that leads to, sinking in the sand, sinking in the mud. So sometimes that's why they allow you to turn it off.
Yeah, I think it's great to be able to turn it off for sand. But comparing this bike to some of the other 21-inch front wheels on the market, those traction control systems are horrible compared to this because they cut the spark, and it's just pretty. I think it's unrideable. I mean, yes, you can suffer through it, but it's really horrible. So I always shut them off.
Yeah, because when they come back on, it's not a smooth on and off the power. I mean, when it decides to start sparking again, it usually does these kind of lunges. And
for me, it's when it stops sparking suddenly that I fold forward. It's when it comes back on, it's usually a relief. It's when it cuts out suddenly. So
I'm the exact opposite.
So I'm not surprised. So I always have to shut it off on the F800, on the Africa Twin. I always have to shut it off. With this bike, I'm always going to leave the traction control on unless I'm in deep sand or some sticky situation I'm trying to get out of.
Yeah, I agree. And after that, like I said, the power, I mean, it's enough to get you in trouble on the street, past semi trucks, whatever you need to do it. It can be a hooligan bike if you want it to. And even after today, I took a quick spin on a 1290, and I'm like, well, that's awesome. I just don't need that for the kind of riding I'm going to do.
Yeah, very few people need the power that the bigger bikes have. I think this has plenty. We did have to get around a couple of cars and some tight twisties today, and it has that power that just right now, you just get on it, you get the job done really quick. So it's nice for that. But off-road, it's got plenty of power. But I really do think it's a much better bike than some of the other 21-inch front wheel bikes on the market. In terms of the technology, is better with the traction control, better ABS, more power. On some of the older models, you're really buzzy at highway speeds. You're topped out in high gear, especially if you've geared down the sprocket for off-road riding. This, it's simply not a problem.
And then another thing that we haven't touched on is suspension. And I know that the one thing I really liked about the Africa Twin, for instance, is that they had really good suspension control. It's not magical, like there's no magic for any of the adventure bikes. They're heavy, you've got to be careful, but Honda really did a good job with the suspension, and that was an area I think KTM paid attention to. Going to a true PDS shock, which is a twin piston, or it actually has a bottoming cone second piston in there that kind of slows it down. And stock, and I've spent a lot of time on a stock one, they did it. It's a big improvement. It doesn't blow through the stroke. It just feels like you have really good damping control. It will still bottom easy by dirt bike standards, but it's also telling you, hey, you're on an adventure bike, you might be going too fast.
makes those water bars a lot more fun than the older models, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were able to hit some of those today, and I was really pleased. Of course, the bike we're on has the Touratech suspension, the cartridge system, and the extreme rear. But I mean, I was getting some good air off these water bars, and I didn't have that hard mechanical bottom out that you sometimes have on the other bikes. So I was really pleased with the with the suspension slot.
And right away, I noticed the difference in suspension from stock to Touratech, especially the fork. That cartridge just gives it's more consistent. There's more damping in there, and then I think you guys are up on spring rates because it's sprung for a heavier rider, maybe a little bit more aggressive also to be able to carry luggage, especially in the rear. And so the fork, you could really feel the damping. In fact, I think all I did was add a couple clicks of compression just because I wanted a little bit more damping. And then out back, the shock was a little bit softer than I kind of wanted initially. So we added some definitely a little bit 3 to 5 clicks of low speed and a couple clicks of high speed, and it just gave it that little bit more control. And overall, it's very similar to the stock. It's just better damping feel is what I noticed when I ride between the two bikes.
Yep, and I was riding your settings today. I didn't change any clickers, and I thought it was fantastic on the Forest Service roads. I think this bike, for cruising the Forest Service roads, BDR, Touratech Rally style riding, I think this bike is just awesome. I mean, it is really a blast to ride.
Yeah. And the other thing that's quite noticeable about it is the weight. Okay, and I think compared to 1190, it's maybe even less than 10 pounds. It's I think 21 or 22 pounds lighter than a 1290, a current 1290. But when you ride it, it feels 20, 30 pounds lighter. Just it's kind of, some of it's in just maneuverability for some reason, and I think it's the spinning stuff inside the motor, and I think also the way that they've got the power being a little bit kind of like less snappy. You don't get the bike kind of that little bit out of control where it snaps, and that's when things start snapping on adventure bikes. That's when you feel how heavy they are. This one's just not doing it. So
yeah,
it feels way lighter than the numbers would lead you to believe.
Yep, the KTM stated number I just saw on the website was 507 pounds fully gassed up is what they're claiming.
Yep.
They're claiming 456 dry weight. But I have to say, once you're rolling, the weight disappears. You don't feel it. I did feel every bit of the 507 pounds when I was turning around on that single track that we decided wasn't passable on this bike, at least for me. And it was a little tough to get around on that. So it's not a dirt bike, but as far as the adventure category goes, for a 1000 cc plus, it's pretty darn light.
Yeah, and I can, when you're doing stuff, when I'm, you'll see in the video where I'm bouncing the bike around and hopping and hitting things. As long as everything's going great, you're in line, you're landing smooth, it's fine. You don't feel the weight. Sure, and it doesn't matter whether it's 507 pounds or 520 or 450. When that starts going the wrong way, it goes the wrong way. It's just this one, it masks it at least as good as anything else. It's not top heavyweight. Some of the bikes tend to have a lot of things up high. This one actually feels a little bit more like the Boxer, the flat twin, where the weight's down low. Maybe not to that level, but it's definitely a lighter feeling bike.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Boxer. When I was out there riding it, we were going through some very twisty roads, and I was thinking, it doesn't fall into the corners quite as quickly and as much fun as like a water Boxer does. Like if I'm riding in the Alps roads, I'd still grab a water Boxer for that on the paved roads. It doesn't have that sort of snappy road feel. It's got all the power. I mean, it's 125 horsepower, so it's the same power as the water Boxer, but it really makes a difference going from the 19-inch front wheel to the 21.
Yeah. And on that note, like when I'm riding those two different kind of bikes, the Boxer and the flat twin to me it's more of a relaxing ride. And when you're on the road, it's this one's kind of, it's gas it, go faster. It's always, it wants you to go faster. The Boxer's just happy to kind of lumber along. Yeah. And in some ways that's good, because this one, even when you're off road, it's going gas it, twist it. It just has a little bit more. It's comfortable. It's not that it's uncomfortable. It's just it's more of an aggressive comfortable. And it feels like it wants to be sporting. Maybe that's why they say ready to race.
That's exactly right. It's KTM ready to race. It brings out the inner hooligan in you. There's something about it. It just sends signals to your brain to get on the gas. But fortunately, it's got some of the computer intervention that allows guys with my skill set to still be safe out there, even though the KTM thing is talking to our brain and encouraging us to twist the throttle. Those are really safety features, and that's what I like about that, is the ABS and good traction control. I think that's a great feature for a lot of guys.
It's safety, but they didn't suck the fun out of it.
Yeah.
So the KTM, I think it comes with a nice piece of plastic in front of the motor as a skid plate. Touratech has a super nice one that goes in the front. because you know you're going to bump into something, especially if you do dumb things like I do. That those center cases are going to hit something, or rocks. Mostly rocks and stuff is going to come flying up. It's a good little investment there. The crash bars up at top, I try not to drop my bike, but you know it happens, and those. I know that those pieces are like $200 a piece. The plastic piece underneath there. I know because I've broke some before.
Yeah.
It's just tipping over, of course. And then the windscreen, you've got a little bit of a taller windscreen, so for moving down the road. I really like the short one when I'm doing aggressive stuff, but I don't really do that much, and even though that's what all the videos show me doing. I usually am just out kind of cruising around and riding. And in reality, I'm never happy on one of these bikes unless I've got the ability to mount panniers, soft bags, something like that. And above and beyond that, the racks on the back, and people kind of forget this, they do help it when it tips over. It doesn't start bending mufflers. You don't break off turn signals and stuff, even when the things are there. And a lot of times I go down that single track trail that I should, and I have to turn the bike around. That is a great lower place to be able to pick up and move your bike. It's probably not the selling feature you want, but I enjoy it.
I had to do that once today on that single track turnaround section myself. I would like to talk about the dongle. So on our old KTM 1190, we never had the dongle, and we finally ordered one just in time for the 1090. And so we got the 1090. We put the dongle in.
Let's explain what a dongle is. It's a plug.
Yeah.
And it's just simply a plug that plugs into one of the wires that's underneath the seat, and it allows the computer to keep the settings that you turn the bike off with. So when you set your ABS to a certain level, maybe you set it to off-road, or maybe you wanted no traction control, when you turn your key off, when you turn it back on, it's the way you left it. Yes. which is I think all bikes should do that. I think it should come stock with this.
Absolutely.
But I guess the lawyers don't like the bikes to do that, but I think the dongle is probably the single best modification you can do that bike when you get it.
And what it does is it overcomes one of my biggest objections to this bike. The biggest beef I have with this bike is the complicated menu. I mean, you have to double press the buttons. It's really complicated.
Hold till throttle's closed. Yeah.
It's like a whole procedure. And once you've ridden the bike a bunch, it becomes natural. But when you've been on different bikes, you jump on this and you hit the dirt and you go to switch modes and your buddies ride off and you got to pull over and you're trying to remember the menu and all this stuff. So this dongle solves all of those problems, which is great. And that was some of the other 21-inch front wheel bikes. Every time you cycle that key, you've got to turn off the traction control. You got to turn off the ABS. This with the dongle remembers it, and it really makes this bike just about perfect in my view.
Yeah. So it has sport, street, rain, and off-road. And I know off-road cuts the power quite a bit. It just tames it. In reality, it's really good. I mean, it's like then you can also actually kind of be aggressive, and it doesn't respond too aggressively. Sport, I wish it was sportier, just right off the bottom. But once that thing's maybe up to 2,000 RPMs, it's doing its thing. It's plenty sporty up there. Rain is really subdued. I mean, it's like off-road plus, and I rarely ever ride it in rain, but I have used it like in mud. Where it was just greasy, slippery, where you're not moving, not getting stuck mud, but it's slippery, and it saves your ass. But then traction control does tons of work. You can almost leave it in street or off-road with the traction control on, and it does the same thing. So the different modes are kind of a nice feature, and it is pretty. Once you learn where that setting is, you can do it on the fly. Actually, to turn the traction control on and off, you have to be stopped, and to do the ABS, you have to be stopped.
You have to be stopped, or just close the throttle? Stopped. Okay.
Stopped. Wheels. The map is the wheels are moving. The map won't even show up on the computer.
I see. Gotcha. If you owned an 1190, which you do, would you sell it to buy the 1090?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, mostly for, like I said, the weight feel and the suspension performance. And I'll know for sure when I start playing around with it, whether it's something to do with the exhaust system, maybe there's some sort of ignition mapping or small intake change, just to get a little bit more throttle response. I like how quiet the bike is. It does have a good sound, but it's quiet, and that's something I always kind of appreciate in a bike. But it's just I'm looking for just that little bit of throttle response.
Did you notice that this bike comes off the showroom with TKC 80s?
Yeah, that's good. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I like an open block, pattern knobby, and that way you can just take it and ride it right out into the dirt. You don't have to go get a set of tires. Which
is exactly what we did. Yeah. We just bought this thing this week. We bought it, bolted the Touratech parts on it, brought it here. I think Jimmy got on it at mile 2, and I don't know, we've probably put 80 miles on it, I would say, between the stuff that you did yesterday and the stuff I did today. And yeah, it's out of the box. It's pretty darn good.
Brakes are pretty much awesome. I mean, there's just so much power. I like the KTM levers are so easy to adjust and fine tune. They're good feels, nothing goofy. And if you can't get that brake to do everything you want, then you need to practice more.
Yeah, I remember the first time I rode the 1190 charging down a forest road, and I was like, just one finger on that front brake, and I had plenty of leverage. It felt so good, and this feels exactly the same. It's one of my favorite things about the 1190 was that one finger front brake. I also feel like the clutch pull is really buttery and easy on this. It's got just really linear engagement, and it just feels really nice.
Yeah, being a hydraulic clutch, that's nice. It kind of self-compensates. And the pull isn't that heavy, and the throw isn't too long to get it to engage. Some have a long throw. It's just when you really want to use it to boost the power, it's there and ready to go.
Yep, I agree 100%. What do you think about the throttle? I mean, it feel linear and good for you?
It's really light. I mean, the pull is light. It's you're twisting a wire. So you're not pulling a cable. It's just doing it. It's picking up your sense. For me, it's a little bit on the light side, but I get used to it. And it's that like I said, that first initial maybe 3% where I wish it was a little more spiky, maybe only in the sport mode, but other than that, once you're going, it's very wrist to rear wheel. I like to say there's not when the traction control's off. If you want it to spin up, it doesn't take much. You can spin it right up. So it's there. It's just if you're used to really pulling a throttle, you're not going to have to pull much.
The last bike I rode was the Africa Twin, and then I jumped on this. And the first water bar that I came into, and I gave it a handful, I had the windscreen a lot closer to my helmet than I expected because the throw is just much more precise. It's a less wrist action equals result as opposed to dragging the cable through the housing. So I really noticed that, especially on the first half hour.
Yeah, it's the stuff. That's the good thing about riding a couple different bikes, switching around, is things like that stick out, and you say, I like this. It's not. I don't always say it's good or bad. It's just like this characteristic suits me. Like when we talk about that initial throttle, you like that. Yeah, I want more, and it just depends on the rider. So. Same thing. It's a benefit for you. It's not for me. So then I'll mess my bike up and I'll let you ride it, and you go, I don't like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 1190, the first time I rode that motorcycle, it was at the KTM Rally, and they were running it all day on demos. I got on that thing. When I got off, I was like, whoa, that thing is hot under the seat. And I immediately emailed Jeremy. I said, you guys got to make something to help work on the heat on this bike. I rode this thing for 2 hours today, and not once did I ever think, oh, God, it's getting warm under my legs.
And I didn't notice it either, but I'm the guy that rode a lot of miles on 1190s, and even the standard one, and I never noticed it. And a lot of times it was actually in the winter. I liked it, though the little bit of heat I was getting, but I never really got that burn until I rode it in traffic once. I really got in a lot of stop and go traffic, and I'm like, now I know what they're talking about. And I didn't really simulate that when I was riding around today. I stand up a lot, so it's not a big deal. It's more when you kind of sit down. But it does have some sort of little plastic piece in there. I think that might kind of help channel some of the heat out of there. But I know that was a big issue on the old one, on the 1190 that people were complaining about. We're not 100% sure on fuel range, but to me, I'm sure it's going to go every bit as far as an 1190 would. I wish the tank were actually, I don't want it any bigger physically. I wish there was more gas hidden on that thing, because especially when we're riding around northern Nevada, I can use, the extra fuel range. I know there's some options for some, side-mounted tanks and things that'll kind of get me to where I need to go with that. Better than carrying gas in bags and stuff.
What I can tell you is that between your riding yesterday and my riding today for about 2 hours, we did burn all the way down to the last bar.
And that's a good thing. Yeah. Because you want me to go hop over logs and things, and taking that extra 2 or 3 gallons off the top makes a big difference in the way the bike acts.
We were not doing economical riding, either one of us. I can tell you that.
Yeah. We were putting as much gas in that thing as we could.
Well, thank you for listening to our thoughts on the new KTM 1090 Adventure R. It has been a blast to ride. It's been fun to sort of compare and contrast it to some of the older KTM bikes and some of the other 21-inch front wheel adventure bikes on the market. So we hope you enjoyed it.
And I'm not done riding it. I'm going to take it out and ride it around a little bit more now. I've got a lot of time on one previous. I'm going to be getting one here pretty soon, and then I'm going to start dinking with it to kind of make it fit me. And that's the cool thing about these bikes is they're easy to customize and you know, make them yours. So I think the platform is great to start with, and I'm stoked to be able to get one pretty soon.
I'll make sure to send you a Touratech catalog.
Yeah.